What's up, everyone? Want to use payload blocks but don't want to get caught up in creating a bunch of blocks that might confine you to a certain set of tools? Well, you can use blocks like images, videos, and text that can then be used inside of column blocks, row blocks, and section blocks. We'll be building what could essentially be considered a block builder in Payload CMS. If you want the code I use in this video, the link to the repo is in the description. Now, let's dive in. Now, why would we do this? Well, you can create endless amounts of custom blocks that all serve one purpose. You could also create singular blocks that can be mixed and matched in certain layouts to then be rendered exactly how you want on your front end. This gives you and your editors the ability to easily move blocks around instead of using code to handle it programmatically. This type of process is similar to how WordPress's Gutenberg blocks work. That means this might be a little bit more of a familiar process for those who have used WordPress in the past. One potential downside to this, as you'll see, is that our blocks start to get a bit crowded when we add more than one row with multiple columns. At the time of this recording, there's no easy way to programmatically title blocks, so you'll need to manually add names to each of these blocks if you want to stay organized. In this video, I'm going to create 6 blocks in 2 sets. The first set will be considered content blocks. These are going to be the actual content we want to render. This will be our image, video, and text blocks. The second set should be considered our layout blocks. I'll create a section block that will take a background color selection, a row block that will hold up to 4 column blocks, which will each hold up to 2 of our content blocks. I'll also build a custom field that tracks the total width of my columns in real time and prevents the CMS from saving if the width doesn't equal 100%. To wrap it all up, we'll build a front end that uses Flex Basis to programmatically determine the width of our content columns. Let's get our files set up by using our terminal. First, we're going to change directory to our blocks directory. And then we're going to run the command make directory column, image, row, section, text, and video. With that done, we can then add all of our files that we're going to use by using the touch command. Again, I'll use the terminal here by pasting in touch column component.tsx, column config, image component, image config, row component, row config, section component and config, text component and config, and finally video component and video config. So now when we look in our blocks, we can see that we have our component and config for each of these files that we're going to be creating. Just to make sure that this goes into our Git repository, I'm going to add all of these files by running git add and then the dot. Now let's work on our back end. And the first thing we'll start working on is our text config. So in our text directory, we'll go to config. And at the top here, we're going to import our block from payload, and then we're going to import lexical editor from the rich text lexical package from payload. We'll then export a new constant called text with block assigned to it. The slug for this block will be text. We'll have a fields array, which will only have one field in it. It's going to be a rich text field with the name text. It will be required, and we will have our editor set to lexical editor. We can then move on to our image, which is going to be a similar setup. So we're going to copy that and then paste it into our config here, and we'll remove the lexical editor. And instead of us having a rich text type in here, we're going to have it be upload. It will be called image. It still will be required, and it will have a relation to our media collection. Now, before we wrap up our image config, we just need to change our constant here to be image, and then we will set the slug to be image as well. Our video is going to look a little bit differently, but we can go to our video config, and then we can still import our block from payload, and then we can export a constant called video assigned the block type to it, have a slug called video, and then our fields array will have one field with the name of video link, a type of text, and it will be required. We'll then also have a name of name with a type of text, and again required set to true. Then we will have a description field that will be type text and not required, but it will have an admin and a description, which will say description for search engines. So we will not render this on our front end. And then below this, we're going to add a row field in order to store the video length. So we will add a type of row, and this doesn't need a name, but it does need fields. So we will have our fields array here. The first one will be a type of number with the name of hours. It will be required. It will have a default value of 0. And we will include admin width of 30%. We'll then duplicate this twice because we'll need one that will be our minutes field and one to be our seconds field. But neither our seconds nor our minutes need a default value. Now we can work on our column config since we have all of our content set up. We will have our column have an import of block from payload, and then we'll export a constant called column with the block type assigned to it, set that equal to our slug of column, and then we'll have our fields array. And in our fields array, we'll have one field that's going to be a type of blocks, name of content, label, content blocks, and we're going to include an empty blocks array because we'll want to use the block references array here to include our text, our image, and our video blocks. Using block references reduces how much data is sent to the client. We simply need to define the block in our payload config, which we'll do in just a second, and then reference it here by slug, which we just did. This does limit what you can do with access control, and you're not able to extend your blocks, so there is a trade-off here. We'll close off our first field here with setting a max rows of 2, so we can limit the number of blocks in each column. Next, we're going to set a select field that will store our column width values. This will be required, and we'll have a set of options, which will be stored in an array. We'll have a label and a value for each of these options, and they'll all be strings. So we'll have a label of auto and a value of auto, and then I'm going to duplicate this a couple times. So we'll then set our label here to 80%, then we'll do another one at 75%, 66%, 50%, 33%, 25%, and finally 20%, and I can delete this last one here. So now we need to set different values here. So this is 4/5, this is 3/4, this is 2/3, this is 1/2, this is 1/3, 1/4, and finally 1/5. The default value for this will be auto. And so we'll come back to why we did this in a little bit once we start talking about our front end. But first we need to finish our row and our sections. So let's jump over to our row config, and we will import block from payload, and then we're going to export a constant called row and assign the block type to it. The slug will be row, and we'll have a fields array. And in our fields array, we'll first have a total width field, and this is going to be a custom field, so we're going to come back to this, but it will be of type text, and then we will have a validate function on it where we will have a value argument of type any, and then within it we can see if value equals 100%, we can return true, else we can return value must equal 100%. This returned error here will be logged as an API error that we can access on the front end as well. For our admin, we can add read only set to true because we don't want to adjust it manually. And then we'll need a components object. Before we get to that, we're going to add another field that will be type blocks, and then we'll have a name of columns with a label of columns, an empty blocks array, and then again we'll use our block references, which will have a reference to our column block. We will set max rows to be 4, so we can set that upper limit of how many rows each section can have. Now, before we get to our section, we need to make an update to our custom error component. So we're going to go to our components, admin, fields, error component. And within this component, we need to adjust our props here to also include message. We can remove value, but we do need to keep show error. And then down here, we can remove our error message and put in our own message there. This allows us to have a little bit more flexibility in what our error message returns. Let's create our custom field now, but before we do, if you're finding this video helpful, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release content about Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. Be sure to also give this video a thumbs up because your engagement facilitates the growth of this channel. Now, let's get back to it. We'll add a new directory called fields. And in this fields directory, we can add a file called column width.tsx. And here we're going to create a custom field that will keep track of our total column width to ensure we don't create a row that's more or less than 100%. This will return an error if that's true, but will help us to see how much more we need to go to get to 100%. First, we do know that this is going to be a client component, so we can use the useClient directive. We'll then need to pull in our useAllFormFields from Payload CMS UI, as well as useField. Both of these hooks will come in handy. We're going to import our type of text field client props from Payload, as well as our text field client component. Then we're going to import our getSiblingData from Payload shared so we can access data from our sibling fields. So we'll bring in import getSiblingData from our Payload shared. Below that, we can import our type of column from our Payload types. Lastly, we'll import React from React. We'll then need to export a constant called column width, which will be assigned the text field client component type, and set that equal to props, which will have the text field client props type assigned to it. We'll then open the function and destructure a constant with path and field from our props. We'll then need to get our fields from useAllFormFields, which is a hook to get the state of all the form fields. So we can get that by using useAllFormFields and setting that equal to an array of fields. We then need to use our useField hook from our path. And we're going to destructure a constant from this, which will have a couple of values. The first one is going to be setValue, showError, and error message. This gives us access to the field we're creating as well as the ability to set a value for that field. Below this, we'll use a constant called SiblingData and set that equal to getSiblingData, where we can get it from our fields at our path. Now we'll store an array of all of our column widths from our SiblingData in a constant called column widths. So first we'll create a constant called column widths, and then we need to check SiblingData columns, if those do exist. If they do, we can get our SiblingData.columns and map from our column with the type of column, and then return our column widths. Now let's store our results. So we can have a constant called results, which will have our SiblingData and check if the columns exist. If they do, we're going to map through those and grab each width, which will have a type of string, and we'll check if width includes auto, and if that's true, we can return 100%, because if auto is used, we just want to return the best fit for that column no matter what. Otherwise, we're going to split that fraction that we get and do some math. So we'll split the fraction by using width split and splitting at the fraction line. And then we can return the division of the top number and the bottom number. So we have split fraction, and if that exists in the first array, we can divide it by a split fraction in the second array item, if that exists, and multiply by 100. Now we can store our percentage value in a constant called percentage, and this will be set equal to first check if results exist, and if they do exist, we can run our results as a string, which will be our math, and we'll want to round it up, so math ceiling. And then we'll use the reduce method to add all of these together. So we then will do our math here using the reduce method, and then at the end cap it off with a percentage sign. Now this handles if we get a number back. If we don't get a number back, we need to return 100%. So since that's the case, we know that this is the value we want, but within this value, we're checking if this part is a number. So if results and this result is not a number, if it's not a number, we can return 100%, but if it is a number, we can return that percentage that we're looking for. We'll then check if this is valid. So if our percentage equals 100%, we have a valid value. Before we return anything, we need a hook to check the state of this field and save it to our database. We'll use the useEffect hook to do this. So we can create a useEffect hook, and we know that we're going to need our set value and our percentage as dependencies here. And we will set value to percentage in order to save the percentage value to our database. Now we can actually return our field. So first, we're going to return a div, and this div is going to have some class names. It will have the class name of field type, which comes from Payload CMS. I'll then include the class for the field type that this field is, which is text. After I include the field type here, we can then check our field admin read only, and if it is read only, we can return the read only class from Payload CMS, and we can then check if the value is not valid, and if it's not, we can return our error class. Now we'll create a label element, so label, and this label will have the value of field.label, and we'll pass this in as a string. And then we'll have a style attribute, which will have a color property, which will check if it's valid. If the value is valid, we will return black. Otherwise, we're going to return red. After our style attribute, we'll have some class names, and those class names will be just field label. And then we need an HTML4 attribute, which will have our field and then the path of that field, and that's it for the label. Now below the label, we'll have another div, which will have a class name of field type wrap, and then within this we can have an input, and this input will have a type of field type, a name of field path. We'll check if it's disabled. If it is read-only, we can then also check if it's read-only. If the admin includes read-only as true, then we'll have our value of percentage, and our ID will be field path as well. Between our closing divs here, we can then get our show error to check if show error is true. If it is, we'll return a div with the class name of error, which will have our error message returned in it. Then we can export our default column width. Now, before we move on from our column width, we need to add one more check here, which will check if results exist, and if they do, we can return our percentage. Now we can add this to our row config, this as well as our custom error component, which we did not add. So in our admin here, we can add our components object, and we'll first put in our field. So our field will have a path of source, collections, fields, column width.tsx. And since it is a default export, I don't need to include the export name here. We'll also need our error, which will have a path of source components, admin, fields, error.tsx with the export name of error. And we'll include client props to include our message, which is going to be our value must equal 100% error message. Now, lastly, on the back end, we need to create our section block. So we can import block from payload, and then we need to export a constant called section with the block type assigned to it. We'll have a slug of section. Then we need our fields array, and our fields array will first have a type of blocks, then a name of row, label rows, and then an empty block array with our block references set to an array of just row. Below this, we're going to enable our editors to select our background color. So we'll have a type of select, and then we'll use a label of background color. And then we'll include some options so our editors don't go crazy. So we'll use value, and we can just use something like BG primary, and then a label of primary color. And then in this, I just duplicated it a couple times. We'll do a secondary color, and we can add commas to the end of each of these. And then we'll add our BG black, BG white, which will have just white and black as the labels. Now, before generating types, we're going to go to our payload config, and at the top of the file, we're going to import all of these. So first, we'll import text from our blocks text config, and then I can duplicate this a couple times, because then we need our video, and then we need our image, which is named img, and then we need our column, our row, and then finally our section. At the top of our build config, we're going to add our blocks array, which will include our text, video, image, column, row, and section. We'll also need to add our section block to our pages config. So this is where we're going to actually use our blocks. It will be in our pages, and we can add a block here and have it be just our section block. So over in our blocks directory, we can go to our index.tsx file, and we need to import our new blocks. So below our fragment import here, we're going to import section from blocks, section component, and again, we can just duplicate this a couple times, and then we will include our row, our column, our text, our image, and then finally our video from video. Now, none of these exist right now, but we can keep going with what we have. So now that we have all of those in there, we need to add their types. So in our post and page import here, we're going to add quite a few more. So we're going to add in our section as section props, our row as row props, column as column props, text as text props, then image as image props, and then finally video as video props. We'll then go to our block components object here, where we can include our section, row, column, text, image, and video. We'll then need to add our types to our blocks type here. So first we need to add section props, which will get our row from that. Then we need our row props, which will get our columns. Then from our text props, we need our block type, which will be true for all of our last blocks here. And we can get rid of that undefined that popped up. Now, finally, down here, just so we can get our styles correct, we don't need our div here, and we can just return our block which means we then need to add a key to our block here. Now let's wrap up the front end so we can see what all of this is going to look like. The place we'll start is with the column component. So we'll open this up and we're going to import our type column as column props from our payload types. And then we're going to import our render blocks component from blocks, and then export a constant called column and set it equal to props, which will be our column props. And then we only need our column width and our content from those props. We then want to get a variant object here for our basis, which will then check for auto and set this to be basis auto at the large screen size. And we'll do this for all our column width values. So we need 2/3, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and finally 1/5. And then we can replace this with the Tailwind classes as they are. Then 1/4 and finally 1/5. I have a typo up here in column width, so I'm just going to fix that. And then we're going to return our div. And in this div, we'll have our render blocks, and the blocks will come from our content. Now we need to return some class names, which will be flex column, grow, basis full at the smallest screen sizes. Then at the small screen size, we'll do basis of 1/2. And now we can use our basis variant column width, which will then tell Tailwind to return any of these classes based on these keys. Now at this point, if you're following along, you're seeing some type errors, and this is because we haven't generated types for our render blocks yet. These should all go away shortly. But first we need to go into our row component, where we can import type row as row props. And this will be from our payload types. Then we can import column from our column component. And then we need to export a constant called row, which will take props of row props. Then we'll have our constant column destructured from our props, and we can return a div with the class names of flex, and just so we state it explicitly, flex row, which will wrap with a padding of 1 rem. We can then map through our columns by using the map method, getting our column item, and then returning a column component for each column item. And now all we need to do is return a key, which will be set equal to column ID, and pass in all of our column props. Next up is the section. So we'll go to our section component.tsx file. We'll import type section as section props from our payload types. We'll import row from our blocks row component. And then we're going to export a constant called section, which will have props as section props here. And then we're going to pull out our row, and we're going to name it rows just so we know we're working with arrays, as well as our BG. Similar to our column component, we're going to create a variant object. This time it'll be for BG color variants. And here we'll have our BG primary, which we'll come back to in just a second. Then we'll have BG secondary, finally BG black, and BG white. And now here in BG white, we'll do BG white, text gray 950. In BG black, we'll do BG gray 800, text gray 50. Then in our primary background, BG emerald 50, dark BG emerald 950, text emerald 950, dark text emerald 200. And then for our BG secondary, we're going to do something similar to this, just with a different color. So I'm going to copy this and paste it, and then replace all of my instances of emerald with blue. We can then return a section element, and in this section element, we can map through our rows by getting our row item and then returning a row component for each row. Again, we just need a key, which will be set equal to our row ID, and we can just pass in our row props. And now our section needs some classes. So we will get our BG color variants. We'll get the background, and if there's nothing returned from Payload CMS, we'll get BG white, and we'll also need margin top and bottom of 0. And now we can start working on our content components. We'll start with text. So let's go to our text component.tsx, and then we're going to import type text as text props from payload types. Then we're going to import our rich text renderer, and then we can export a constant called text with the props of text props, and we can just get our text from those props and then return the rich text component with our data being set equal to text and a class name of margin top and bottom of 2. We'll work on our image next, so we can go to our image component.tsx, and we're going to import our type of image as img props, as well as our media, and these will both come from our payload types. We'll also import image from next image, and then we can export our img with props set to image props, and then we can pull out our image from our props and return the image component that we need. We'll have a source, an alt. We'll also have a height and a width. To get all of these, we're going to destructure our image, cast it as media, and we're going to pull out our file name, our alt description, width, and height. So our source is going to be our environment variable for our S3 bucket, with file name being the name of the file. Then we need our alt description, our height, which will set a default value of height to be 360 pixels, and then our width to have a default of 640, just in case our height and width don't exist. Then we will need to add some class names. So we're going to add a class of aspect square, overflow hidden, object cover, and margin top and bottom of 2. And now we're ready for our video component. So we can go to our video component.tsx, and then we're going to import our type of video as video props. This will come from our payload types. Then we can export a constant called video set equal to our props of video props. And then we just need our video link as well as the name from our props. We'll then need a constant to store our video link so we can include it in a variety of ways in the CMS. We'll do this by creating a constant called processed video link and set it equal to video link, and check that it includes our HTTPS, YouTube, and if this is true, we can return video link.split and split it at that YouTube link and get the second item in the array, which is the embed code. So if not, we can just take the video link because it should just be the embed code. We'll then return the iframe that YouTube uses to serve content. First, we'll set a class name of aspect video, object contain, height, auto, and margin top and bottom of 2. We'll then include in our source the embed link, which is www.youtube.com/embed, and include the processed video link constant here, which should just be the embed code. Our title will be set equal to name. We will have a width of 100%, as well as a height of 100%. And then we'll allow a few features here, like our accelerometer, autoplay, clipboard write, encrypted media, gyroscope, and picture-in-picture. We'll also allow full screen and set that equal to true. Now we should be able to generate our import map and our types. And with that generated, we can start clearing up some errors, so column width being one of them. And then check here in our column. Our errors go away there. Then we can go to our row and see our errors disappear. Same with our section. And then in our blocks, all of our errors go away there as well. We can set in our render blocks a TS expect error, which I deleted earlier, but we actually still do need. And finally, our column props, which take the content object here. So now in our columns, we should see our errors go away as well. So now with all of our errors out of the way, we can run pnpm dev. Then we can go to our admin panel. Then we'll go to our pages. And then we will go to our portfolio. And in our portfolio, we'll add some content. So we can add our section content block. Then we can create a background color. We'll select primary color. And then we can add a row. And now we can add a column. And so since our column defaults to auto, we can see our total width equal 100%. But I can change this to 33% and we can see total width changes as well. Now, of course, to make sure that this always equals exactly 100%, I do round up to make sure that our total column width will equal a total of 100%, even when we have fractions that don't equal up evenly to 100. So we can add a content block. We'll just add text. This is a column, and then we'll add another column just so we can see the math. First of all, auto sets our total width back to 100, but I can set this to 50%, and now our total is 84%, but we don't have anything that's going to equal that out. So we will just do 66% here, and we can see now total width is 100%. We'll add an image, which we can choose from existing and just use my headshot, and add some text that says, "This is my headshot." Now to show this off fully, I'll duplicate this row, and then I'm going to duplicate the whole section. So first we will edit this row to have one column of 25%, this column of 50%, and one more column, which will have text 25%. And then this I can set to 25. And then in our second section here, we'll keep those the same and change our background color to our secondary color and publish those changes. Now, if I go to our portfolio page, we can see that I have some columns and then two sections with different background colors. Now, of course, these are both split into two columns, but as I increase the screen size, even though this gets really large at a 33 and 66% split, we can see that we have a 25, 50, and 25 split, and then a different background color here with two rows of the same sets of columns. Now, of course, you can style this however you need it to be, but you can clearly see the columns broken out. This image could be smaller, but at the end of the day, this works exactly as intended. Now we have a fully functioning nested blocks setup that allows you to move things around easily without building new blocks for any and all use cases you can think of. We've also given our editors the ability to choose from a set of background colors that we're still able to control and maintain a consistent design. Beyond that, we now have a custom field that uses data from nearby fields to validate that our total column widths don't come in under or over 100%. Hopefully this video has shown you a lot of flexibility you have with Payload CMS. There's a lot you can do with the concepts covered here, including building your own fields with custom logic. If you found this video helpful, please like it and share it with others who might also find it useful. Check to make sure you've subscribed to my channel and receiving notifications so you never miss when I release more content about Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. If you have suggestions or questions, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.